Hey guys, it's Will with Adventures in Anime. Today we're talking about Wicked City. That's my brain blowing out of my skull because Wicked City is insane. If you know about this movie, you probably already know this. You don't need me to tell you that. If you don't know about this movie, holy hell. It is one of the most imaginative movies I have ever seen, and I don't say that lightly. And it is also one of the most grotesque, bizarre, disgusting. It's just bananas. Like, this is the movie that people talk about when they talk about how weird and disgusting and over the top anime is. Obviously not literally, because there's a lot of movies like this, but for me, this is the one that I've watched so far for this series where it was just like, what's happening? But in the best way possible. So this movie came out in 1987. It was directed by Yoshiaki Kawajiri, who he did Goku Midnight Eye, which I've already done a video on for this series. He also did Ninja Scroll, which is like hugely famous anime film, and I have acquired a copy of that, and I will be doing that for a later episode. I haven't watched it yet. He did Demon City Shinjuku, which I just watched, so there's another episode coming up on that. He did one of the later Vampire Hunter D movies, like I think Vampire Hunter D Bloodlust. He did, but this was his first, I think this was his first movie that he solo directed. He had previously done a segment of Neo Tokyo, which is like an omnibus film, which I also have a copy of, which hopefully I'll be watching soon. And I think that from what I was reading, I did a little bit of research about this before I did this video. He was asked to make a movie that was like 35 minutes or something like that, and the people who were financing it were so impressed by what he did that they let him go up to 80 minutes, and so we have a feature film now, which is Wicked City. Like I said, I think it came out, I have my notes here, as I always do when I do this, April 25th of 1987, and it was based on a novel by Hideyuki Kikuchi, or Hideyuki, I can't read my handwriting. There's a series of novels that he wrote, and this is based, I think, on the first one. And then I'm just trying to see if there's anyone else I should mention here. Actually, the screenwriter, I think, was Norio Osada? Is that, my handwriting is so bad. Noru. It might be Noru Osada. The important thing to know here is that if I've read this correctly, one of the screenwriters of this film wrote Lady Snowblood and maybe directed it too. He wrote and directed live action kind of like exploitation films in the 70s in Japan. So this was an OVA, which means it went straight to VHS. So what is this movie about? So basically, and like right away, if you're familiar with The Matrix, I think this movie was probably a big influence on The Matrix. Obviously, Ghost in the Shell, with regards to anime, is the biggest influence on The Matrix because the Wachowskis actually wanted to adapt that movie and then couldn't get the rights to it, or whoever they were working with wouldn't buy them the rights to it or something, so they went and wrote The Matrix instead. But that's the story that I've heard. But so you have this guy who is it seems as though he's like a normal kind of salaryman, right? He has like a job in an office, and he wears nice suits, and he makes good money, and he has a nice apartment, and he like goes out to the bar and picks up women, and he's very handsome and all this stuff. But then you find out he's actually a member of something called the Black Guard, which is this clandestine government organization. And so what you have, the setup of the movie is that there's parallel dimensions. There's our world, which is in the case of this movie, it takes place in 80s Tokyo, right? So at the time of the movie, it was like contemporary Tokyo, right? And then there's a parallel dimension of like monsters and demons, and there's a truce between their world and ours, and the truce is being renewed. And there's a character who is like kind of like central to the renewal of the truce, who this guy who's a part of the Black Guard has to protect, because there's like a radical faction of demons and monsters who's trying to kill him so that the truce doesn't get signed, because they believe that they should be the masters of the humans because they have all these great powers and stuff like that, right? It's almost like Magneto's kind of thing, right? Of like, he doesn't feel that mutants should be hiding in the shadows. It's the same kind of thing. Like, these monsters think they should just be allowed to go and take over the whole world, right? Because why not? Because they have all these powers. And then he's paired up with a woman from the female agent from the demon world, and the pair of them have to protect this guy. And the world is so cool, and the locations, and like it goes back in time. Like, they go to this at some point, they go to like this psychic like medical facility type thing, and it's like this ancient Japanese temple, which gives you the notion that this parallel dimension thing has been going on for hundreds and hundreds of years and no one has known about it. So, and again, it's like the Matrix in that thing of like, here's the world that you know. By the way, this other thing is happening the whole time and you don't know anything about it. Harry Potter too, right? It's like the same Stranger Things. Like there's so many of these things now. And I mean, just the imagination in this movie is genuinely unlike anything I have ever seen. I have to say that this movie is very grotesque, like I said. It's really violent. It's really disgusting. It's really, really dark. But it's interesting because like in The Matrix, right? In like a lot of those kind of movies, the goal of the good guys is to start a war or to defeat someone or to kill bad guys or something or to take over, right? In this movie, the goal of the protagonist, and there are some twists, and I'm not going to spoil the twist for you. So if you've seen the movie, you know that some of these things change, but I'm just kind of saying what you know from the outset of your assumptions about the movie, right? The goal of the protagonist is actually to preserve peace. So it's a really interesting twist that you have this extremely grotesque, violent, bizarre movie that where the core principle is we don't want a war. We want peace between these worlds. But like I said, I mean, like there's a scene in this movie, and you'll know what I'm talking about if you've seen it, with a parasite, where this guy has a parasite and he pukes it up, and then it goes up this woman's sleeve and like gets inside of her. And it's just like, it's insane and disgusting, but it's so imaginative. And just the way that the movie is drawn and like the way it's animated and what you see and the way you're showing things, it's just unlike what I'm used to seeing, not just in animated films, but in movies in general. And it's just so, like the way that the lighting is done, the way the colors are done, it's just really incredible. And there's another scene with a woman who is part spider. You'll know what I'm talking about if you know this movie, and which parts of her are part spider. It's just nuts. It's like, how did they think of that? And it's like this psychosexual nightmare. Like, and I will say, so if you saw my little take on Gogol 13, there's a rape scene in that movie, in Gogol 13. And that completely took me out of that movie because it was not at all in keeping, I didn't think, with the tone of that movie. It wasn't, I don't want to say it wasn't necessary to the plot, because I think you could make a very strong argument that rape scenes are never necessary to a story unless the story is foundationally about someone who has survived rape or what they're going through or something like that, right? But like, it just kind of came out of nowhere and it felt nasty and malicious, and I just didn't like it. And there is a rape scene in this movie that just didn't, and I don't know if it's because this movie is so disgusting and so sexual and so aggressively violent and grotesque, like from the very beginning, that it's in keeping with that, but I didn't find it disgusting or reprehensible or offensive. And I usually, like, I very rarely watch movies with those types of scenes in them, and I don't like them when I do see them. And it didn't affect me. And I mean, part of it is that, so the woman is, she's from the demon world, and the setup is that the demon people, when they come to the human world, disguise themselves in human shells, but those are not their actual bodies. Their bodies are a different form that they assume. So, and one of the things I love so much about this movie is the different forms that the demons assume. You can never predict what they're going to look like. Their powers are all different. Their physical appearance is all different, but the way they set it up, it works perfectly because you're expecting that. And it's just so cool of like there's one scene where this guy in the very beginning where these two guys are attacking the protagonist, and one of them opens his mouth and this huge demon head just like comes out of his mouth, and then the whole demon like appears. It's just nuts. And like one of them has these tentacles that come out of his chest and start like spiraling around, and like you never know what's going to happen in this movie, and in the best way. It's like totally unpredictable and crazy. But I was talking about the way that it's set up is that these demons are not in their own bodies, and so when the rape scene happens, there's this like disassociation of the fact that you know that it's not her physically that is happening to, because her body is a different form that has been contained within this shell, and the shell is what is being destroyed. It's hard to describe, but it's very, and then this movie has been, I did a little bit of reading about like reactions to this movie when it first came out in the United States and stuff like that. And there are people who have condemned it as just disgusting, grotesque, misogynistic trash, basically. And if you've watched a lot of these videos, you know that or maybe not on this channel, but if you've seen like other videos that I've done on the Terrible Infant channel or the Hong Kong Cinema Appreciation Society channel, you'll know that I am very quick to dismiss stuff as misogynistic or like horrible trash if I think that it is that. But for some reason, this movie just did not it didn't strike me as that. And I can't articulate why. It's just something about how the film was made. It's a really well written film. The pacing is really good. It's a little bit kind of moody. It has like kind of a Blade Runner feel to it. It's not as slow as Blade Runner, but it has that kind of moodiness to it. I'm just going to look at my notes because there's some other things I wanted to say about this movie. Like I said, the world building is just incredible. I mean, the thing about the body and the demon bodies and the forms that people assume seems to be getting at a deeper ontological thing of what are the forms that people assume throughout their lives, and what is your true nature. Like if the demon is within the body and the demon is different from the body, and you almost have this sense of like the soul, the spirit, and the physical form. And there's this opening monologue in the movie that's really interesting where the protagonist talks about computers, all the skyscrapers in Tokyo. Like this is very much like an 80s Japanese movie. The bubble economy and all the technology that was happening in Japan, and the increased social isolation because of isolating technologies like VCRs. You don't have to go to the movie theater anymore. Video games, you don't have to leave your bedroom anymore to go to the arcade. Like, everyone has a computer. You don't have to go out to talk to people anymore. Like all of these things that were happening in the 80s in Japan led to this, this basically a generation of people who was used to just being inside all the time, right? And not socially interacting with people. And he talks about people being barricaded by these skyscrapers, and like this sense that like we have created all of these amazing massive things, and we are the masters of the world because of this. And there's this spiritual world existing right beside that is denied by these people that comes and destroys them. So you could very obviously read that as a metaphor for, I mean, if you're thinking about Japan, right, you think about Shintoism, and Shintoism is the native Japanese religion. And in Shintoism, there's a belief that things have spirits. They're called kami, right? So like a tree has a spirit, a fox has a spirit. The fox is like a mischievous spirit. Like, or I mean, I don't remember exactly what the nature of all the spirits are, but like you get the point. Like each spirit has its own personality and stuff like that. And humans are a part of that. And it's this sense of energy and connectedness and this holistic view of the ecosystem, right? And so you could very easily read Wicked City as a warning of this is what happens when you deny the spiritual or the thing that exists within, the monster within, right? In favor of all these physical kind of hubristic accoutrements that you have built around yourself, right? If that's the thing that makes any sense that I can say. So it's really interesting because it is this grotesque, violent, weird, like very sexual movie that is very much not for kids, probably like an NC-17, that is really well made, mainstream, entertaining science fiction kind of action horror, but at the same time can be read as this kind of really dark metaphor for what was happening to Japanese society in the 1980s. It's just, there's so much going on here. I could talk about this forever. I'm just, again, checking my notes to make sure I didn't leave anything out. I mean, like I said with Gogol 13, you see influence from live action filmmaking on this movie. So you see like focus racks, and there's like there's a couple editing techniques that are really reminiscent of film noir, where you have like the neon signs in the night and stuff like that, and like the images imposed on top of one another. And the way we used to shoot like all like the signs of New York City or Broadway or something, and then impose those images on top of each other while someone did like a voiceover in like a film noir. Like I think that they do that in The Sweet Smell of Success. You have something similar to that here. There's definitely like a film noir influence with the voiceover and stuff like that. I mean, you could do a whole analysis of this new movie based on gender stuff too. I don't think it would be particularly favorable towards the movie in the light of discussions about gender in 2020, with like the woman is very androgynous when you first meet her, and then after she died, okay, so there's spoilers here, so I don't want to spoil it, but her appearance becomes less androgynous as the film goes on. As different things happen to her, she becomes more and more traditionally feminine, and there's other stuff happening with gender in this movie. So as a whole other can of worms I'm not going to get into. My name is Will. The movie is Wicked City. It's one of the best movies I've seen so far in this series. And again, I know that sounds bizarre because I've described to you all these horrible like things, but it's just it's almost like it's like this. It's so unique and has so much personality that it must be reconciled with. You can't just throw it away as trash. Like I think critics did because they just wanted, it's this weird Japanese comic. And although one critic did make the interesting point that a movie this violent with this much crazy sex and other weird stuff in it and sexual violence in it comes from a society with some of the lowest crime statistics in the entire world. And that's true of anime in general, right? And anime, especially more adult-oriented anime, tends to be very rapey, which is one of the things I don't like about it. One of the reasons I avoided watching a lot of it for a while. So what does that say about the movies being so extreme but coming from this country? But then, if you read about World War II, I don't know. I mean, I'm not going to get into the weeds here. I'm going to stop. The movie is Wicked City. My name is Will. This is Adventures in Anime, and we will see you next time.